Dahlia's heart pounded as she clutched her purse, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The alley was dark, the dim glow of a flickering streetlight barely illuminating the figure in front of her, the man who had just yanked her bag from her shoulder. "Please," she gasped, fear tightening her throat. "Just take the money and go." The thief, a wiry man with a hood pulled low over his face, sneered. "Oh, I plan to." He yanked her bag open, rifling through its contents with rough, greedy hands. Dahlia took a desperate step backward, her mind racing. She never should have taken the shortcut home. The city streets were unpredictable at night, and now she was paying the price. Before she could react, a deep, commanding voice cut through the night. "Let her go." Dahlia turned, her eyes widening as a tall man emerged from the shadows. He was broad-shouldered, dressed in a crisp suit that somehow looked effortless despite the chaos unfolding. His sharp jawline was tense, his dark eyes locked on the thief with an intensity that sent a chill down her spine. The thief laughed. "And who the hell are you?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he stepped forward with a confidence that made it clear he wasn't afraid. "You have 3 seconds to drop the bag and walk away." Dahlia barely registered what happened next. The thief lunged, but the stranger was faster. In a swift, precise movement, he twisted the thief's arm behind his back, forcing him to his knees. With a grunt of pain, the thief released the bag, and it fell to the ground at Dahlia's feet. She stared, frozen, as the man held the thief in place with an effortless strength. "You picked the wrong person to mess with tonight," he muttered before shoving the thief away. The man scrambled to his feet and bolted down the alley without looking back. Silence settled over them, heavy and charged. Dahlia exhaled shakily. "Oh my God, I don't even know what to say." The man turned to her, his expression softening. "Are you all right?" She nodded, though her hands were still trembling. "I think so. That was incredible. Who are you?" He bent down, picking up her bag and handing it to her. "Quentin Sinclair." The name sent a jolt through her. She had heard it before. Quentin Sinclair, the millionaire entrepreneur, the man whose face had been plastered across business magazines, who owned half the high-end properties in the city. And now, he had just saved her. Still dazed, she took the bag from him, her fingers brushing against his. "Dahlia Hayes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Quentin's lips curled into something almost like a smile. "Nice to meet you, Dahlia, though I wish it were under better circumstances." She let out a nervous laugh. "Yeah, me too." His eyes studied her for a moment, as if assessing whether she was truly all right. "Do you live nearby? I can walk you home." Dahlia hesitated. Normally, she would never accept such an offer from a stranger, but Quentin Sinclair was hardly just anyone. And after what had just happened, the idea of walking home alone sent a shiver down her spine. Yes, I do," she admitted. "Then let's go," he said smoothly, falling into step beside her. They walked in silence for a few moments, the tension of the encounter still lingering in the air. Dahlia stole a glance at him, taking in the sharp lines of his face, the quiet confidence in his posture. "You didn't have to do that," she said eventually. "Step in, I mean." Quentin's gaze remained forward. "I wasn't going to stand by and watch someone get hurt." Something about the way he said it made her stomach tighten. There was an edge to his voice, something deeper beneath the surface. They reached her apartment building sooner than she expected. Dahlia paused outside the entrance, turning to face him. "Thank you, Quentin, really. You didn't just save my bag, you probably saved me." He met her eyes, something unreadable flickering in his expression. "You don't owe me anything, Dahlia, just—" "Be careful, the city isn't always kind," she swallowed, nodding. "I will." For a moment, neither of them moved. The night air was thick with something she couldn't quite name, a pull, an unspoken connection. Then, with a small nod, Quentin took a step back. "Good night, Dahlia." "Good night," she echoed, watching as he turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. Dahlia exhaled, pressing a hand to her racing heart. She had no idea why this stranger, this millionaire, had stepped in to help her. but something told her this wasn't the last time she would see Quentin Sinclair. Dahlia sat at her tiny kitchen table, staring at the untouched cup of tea in front of her. The events of the previous night replayed in her mind in vivid detail: the cold grip of fear when the thief snatched her purse, the sudden presence of Quentin Sinclair, the effortless way he had stepped in and taken control. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the intensity in his dark gaze, heard the steady confidence in his voice. There was something about him, something enigmatic, almost unreadable. A man like that didn't just appear in someone's life for no reason. A sharp knock at her apartment door jolted her from her thoughts. Her heart leapt into her throat as she hesitated. Visitors weren't common. She lived alone, and aside from her best friend, Melanie, no one ever dropped by unannounced. She rose cautiously, peeking through the peephole, her breath caught. Standing outside was Quentin. She hesitated for only a second before unlocking the door. As it swung open, he stood there, dressed in another impeccably tailored suit, his expression calm but focused. "Good morning, Dahlia," he said smoothly. "Quentin," she asked, her voice betraying her surprise. "What are you doing here?" He studied her for a moment before answering. "May I come in?" She hesitated, but something in his demeanor told her he wasn't here for anything sinister. Slowly, she stepped aside, allowing him to enter. He moved through the small space with an ease that contrasted sharply with the grandeur she imagined he was used to. The luxury of his world didn't belong here in her tiny apartment with its mismatched furniture and flickering kitchen light. "You didn't answer my question," she said, closing the door behind him. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "I wanted to check on you," she blinked. "Check on me. You went through something traumatic last night. I wasn't sure if you had anyone to turn to." Something stirred in her chest, an unexpected warmth at the idea that he had thought of her after they parted. "I appreciate that," she admitted. "But why, you don't even know me." His jaw tightened slightly, as if he was weighing his words carefully. "I don't like leaving things unresolved." She folded her arms, studying him. "You already saved me. You didn't have to come back." "I know," he said simply. A beat of silence passed between them. Dahlia wasn't sure how to react to a man like Quentin Sinclair, someone who existed in a world so far removed from her own, yet was standing in her living room as if he belonged there. "You don't seem like the type of man who does things without a reason," she said, tilting her head slightly. "So what is this, really?" His lips pressed together for a moment before he exhaled, as if deciding to abandon whatever guarded answer he had originally planned. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I do know that when I left you last night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to see you again." Her stomach tightened at his words. She wasn't sure what to make of him. Quentin glanced around the apartment, his gaze briefly landing on the untouched tea before returning to her. "Have you been able to rest?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "Not really." He nodded, as if he had expected that answer. Then, to her surprise, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, elegant card. He placed it on the table between them. "This is my number," he said. "If you ever need anything, use it." She looked at the card, then back at him. "You don't have to do this." "I know," he said again. Something about the way he said it made her chest tighten. For a moment, she considered refusing. She barely knew him. He was a man who operated in a realm of wealth and power, a world she had never been part of. But the memory of last night, the way he had stepped in without hesitation, lingered in her mind. Slowly, she reached for the card, running her fingers over the smooth surface before tucking it into her pocket. "Thank you," she said softly. Quentin nodded once, then glanced at his watch. "I have a meeting in 20 minutes, but I wanted to make sure you were all right before I went." The idea that a man like him had taken time out of his undoubtedly busy morning just to check on her was disarming. "I appreciate it," she said honestly. He gave her a final, lingering look before stepping toward the door. As he reached for the handle, he paused. Be careful, Dahlia, she swallowed. I will. And then, just like that, he was gone. Dahlia stood in the quiet of her apartment, the weight of his visit settling over her. She didn't know why Quentin Sinclair cared. But something told her this wasn't the last time he would show up at her door. Dahlia stared at the business card on her kitchen table, the elegant lettering catching the morning light. Quentin Sinclair. The name alone carried weight, yet it was the man himself who lingered in her thoughts. His presence had been commanding, his words careful but laced with something she couldn't quite name. He had gone out of his way to check on her, leaving behind a direct line to his world, one she had no business stepping into. She told herself she wouldn't use it. But as the days passed, his offer loomed in her mind. Life carried on, yet everything felt slightly altered, as if she were waiting for something she couldn't define. It wasn't until the following weekend that fate decided for her. Dahlia had been walking home from the bookstore, arms full of paperbacks, when a sleek black car pulled up beside the sidewalk. The tinted window rolled down, revealing Quentin in the driver's seat. "You always walk alone at night." His voice held no judgment, only observation. Dahlia's pulse kicked up at the sight of him. She hadn't expected to see him again, let alone like this. "I didn't think I'd run into trouble twice in 1 week." His gaze flicked to the books in her arms before returning to her face. "Get in." She hesitated, glancing down the street. The logical part of her knew she should decline, but something about Quentin, his quiet insistence, his unreadable expression, made her decision for her. Carefully, she opened the door and slid into the passenger seat. The interior of the car was as refined as the man himself. The scent of leather and something distinctly him filled the space. She shifted, suddenly hyper-aware of how small her world was compared to his. "Where are you headed?" he asked. "Home." Without another word, he pulled back onto the street, navigating the city with an ease that spoke of familiarity. She studied him from the corner of her eye. His jaw was tight, his focus sharp on the road ahead. "You didn't just happen to be driving by, did you?" He didn't answer immediately. Then, "No." A strange warmth spread through her chest. "You were looking for me," Quentin exhaled, his fingers tightening briefly on the steering wheel. "I told you I don't like leaving things unresolved." She didn't know what to say to that. The weight of his attention was almost unnerving, but not in a way that made her want to pull away. It was rare, the feeling that someone was watching out for her. Silence stretched between them, thick with words neither of them spoke. "You didn't call," he said after a moment. Dahlia traced the edge of one of her books with her fingertips. "I didn't think I should." "Why not?" She turned to face him fully. "Because we live in different worlds, Quentin. She gestured vaguely. "You. And I don't belong in whatever this is." His jaw twitched. "You think I care about that, shouldn't you?" He pulled up in front of her building, shifting the car into park before turning to her. His gaze was steady, unwavering. "I don't chase after things that don't matter to me," her breath caught. Quentin leaned slightly closer, just enough for the space between them to feel charged. "I haven't been able to stop thinking about you, Dahlia, and I don't know what that means yet. But I'm not the kind of man who ignores something when it feels important." Her fingers curled around the book in her lap, gripping the worn cover. "You barely know me. Then let me." Her heart pounded. A dozen reasons to say no flooded her mind, but none of them outweighed the pull she felt toward him. "Okay," she breathed. A flicker of something passed through his eyes, something almost triumphant. He reached into the center console and pulled out a slip of paper, scribbling something down before handing it to her. "Meet me tomorrow," he said. 7 o'clock, no expectations, just dinner." Her fingers brushed against his as she took the paper. "All right." Quentin studied her for a second longer before nodding. "Good night, Dahlia," she swallowed, stepping out of the car before she could overthink it. The moment she was inside her apartment, she unfolded the paper. An address. A part of her knew this was a bad idea. She had nothing in common with a man like Quentin Sinclair. And yet she couldn't bring herself to walk away. Something had already started between them, and now there was no stopping it. Dahlia stood in front of the towering restaurant, her fingers tightening around the strap of her purse. The place was nothing short of breathtaking, warm, golden light spilling from the windows, casting a soft glow onto the cobblestone street. It wasn't just a restaurant, it was an experience, a world away from the cozy diners and corner cafes she usually frequented. She swallowed hard, hesitating before stepping forward. This was Quentin Sinclair's world, polished, refined, and luxurious. A place where men in tailored suits and women in designer gowns moved as if they belonged. She wasn't sure if she did. Before she could turn and reconsider, the large glass doors swung open. Quentin was waiting just inside, his dark eyes finding hers instantly. He was dressed in a deep navy suit, the fabric hugging his frame in a way that made it clear it was tailored just for him. And yet, despite the expensive surroundings, his expression was unreadable except for the way his gaze softened slightly when he saw her. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them in a few strides. "You came." Nerves tightened in her stomach, but she forced a smile. "You invited me." His lips parted slightly, as if he had been expecting a different answer. Then, without another word, he held out his hand. She looked down at it before placing hers in his. His fingers closed around hers with a warmth that sent a shiver up her spine, grounding her in a way that made no sense. Inside, the restaurant was even more stunning. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting soft reflections on the polished marble floors. The scent of rich spices and freshly baked bread filled the air, mingling with the quiet hum of conversation. A waiter appeared instantly, leading them through the room to an intimate, candle-lit table near the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city stretched beyond the glass in a sea of lights, a breathtaking view that should have held her attention. But all she could focus on was the man sitting across from her. Quentin had barely taken his eyes off her since she arrived. It wasn't just admiration, it was something deeper, something that made her pulse quicken. "You're nervous," he said, his voice quieter than usual. She let out a small breath. "You noticed." His gaze didn't waver. "I notice a lot when it comes to you." Her fingers toyed with the edge of the menu, a futile attempt to steady herself. "This is just a lot. I don't usually do places like this." He leaned forward slightly, resting his forearm on the table. "You don't have to be anyone but yourself, Dahlia." Something in the way he said it made her chest tighten. The waiter returned, pouring a rich red wine into their glasses before disappearing again. Quentin lifted his, swirling the liquid slowly before taking a sip. His movements were effortless, controlled, as if he was always in complete command of the space around him. She studied him carefully. "You're used to this, aren't you?" His gaze lifted to hers. "To what?" "This," she gestured around them. "Luxury, power, having people cater to you without question." A flicker of something unreadable crossed his face. "It's all I've ever known. Doesn't it ever feel lonely?" For the first time he hesitated. Then, after a long pause, he set his glass down. "More than you know." The honesty in his voice made her breath catch. For all the confidence, the wealth, the control, there was something else beneath it all, something quieter. Something that made him human. Their food arrived, and conversation drifted into something lighter. She told him about her work, about the books she loved, about the tiny coffee shop tucked away in her neighborhood that made the best pastries she'd ever tasted. He listened intently, asking questions, seeming genuinely invested in every word. In turn, she found herself wanting to know more about him. Not just the corporate empire or the wealth, but the man underneath it all. As their plates were cleared, Quentin leaned back slightly, watching her in a way that made her skin heat. "You surprise me, Dahlia," she raised an eyebrow. "How so?" He exhaled slowly, as if choosing his words carefully. "My life has always been predictable, calculated. But then I saw you in that alley and everything shifted. Her throat tightened. "I don't know what to say to that. You don't have to say anything." His fingers traced the rim of his glass. "Just tell me one thing." Her heart pounded as she nodded. "Do you feel it too?" The question hung between them, thick with something unspoken. She could lie. She could pretend this was just a dinner, a fleeting moment in a life she would never truly be part of. But she couldn't deny the way her pulse raced whenever he looked at her. The way her breath caught when his fingers brushed against hers. So instead, she whispered, "Yes." Quentin's gaze darkened, the intensity in his expression making her stomach flip. For a moment, it felt as if the entire world had quieted, as if nothing else existed beyond the space between them. Then, with deliberate slowness, he reached across the table, his fingers brushing against hers before fully taking her hand in his. "This isn't going to be simple," he murmured. She swallowed hard. "I know, but I don't care." His grip tightened slightly as if grounding them both. "I want this. I want you." Her breath hitched, the weight of his words settling deep in her chest. She hadn't expected this, hadn't expected him. But as she sat there, her hand in his, she realized something terrifyingly simple. She wanted him too. Dahlia stepped out of the restaurant, the evening air cool against her skin. The city stretched before her, alive with movement, yet she felt as if she were standing still, caught in the wake of Quentin's words. He wanted her. No pretenses, no games. He had said it with an honesty that left her breathless. Quentin emerged beside her, his presence steady and certain. He didn't rush, didn't push, just stood close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, as if silently reassuring her that this moment was real. A sleek car pulled up to the curb, the valet stepping out to open the door. Quentin turned to her, his gaze expectant but patient. "Let me take you home," he said. Dahlia hesitated for only a second before nodding. The evening had already changed the course of everything. There was no reason to pretend otherwise. She slid into the car, the scent of leather and something distinctly his surrounding her once more. The ride was quiet but not uncomfortable. There was a charged stillness between them, a mutual understanding that whatever this was, it was only beginning. As the city lights flickered past, Quentin finally spoke. "I meant what I said." Dahlia turned to him, her fingers tightening slightly in her lap. "I know." His expression was unreadable, but his voice carried weight. "I don't say things lightly." Something in her chest tightened. "Neither do I," he exhaled, his fingers tapping once against the steering wheel before stilling. "Then tell me what this is to you," she swallowed, choosing her words carefully. "Something I wasn't expecting." His gaze flickered toward her, assessing. "But something you want." The truth sat heavy on her tongue. She could deny it, pretend she wasn't affected by the way he looked at her, by the way his presence had slipped into her life and refused to leave. But she had never been a coward. "Yes," Quentin's jaw tightened slightly, as if he was holding something back. "Then don't run from it." Dahlia let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "I'm not." The car slowed to a stop in front of her apartment. The street was quiet, the glow of the street lamps casting long shadows across the pavement. Quentin didn't move immediately. Instead, he turned fully toward her, his gaze unwavering. "I don't do things halfway, Dahlia." She met his stare, steady and sure. "Neither do I." A flicker of something passed through his eyes, something unreadable yet unmistakably intense. He reached for her hand, his fingers brushing against hers before fully enclosing them. The warmth of his touch sent a shiver through her, grounding her in a way that made her pulse quicken. "I'll see you soon," he said, his voice quieter now. Dahlia nodded, her heart pounding as she slipped out of the car. She didn't look back as she stepped inside her building, but she felt his eyes on her, watching until she was safely inside. The moment she shut the door behind her, she leaned against it, her breath unsteady. This wasn't just a fleeting encounter. It wasn't something that would fade by morning. Something had begun between them, something neither of them could ignore. And for the first time in a long time, Dahlia wasn't afraid of what came next. Dahlia sat at her small dining table, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup as the city hummed beyond her window. She hadn't been able to shake the feeling of Quentin's presence, the weight of his words lingering long after she had left his car. It wasn't just attraction, this was something deeper, something that unraveled the careful order she had built around her life. She didn't know what to do with it. The knock at her door startled her. She wasn't expecting anyone, and for a brief moment, she hesitated. But when she opened it, Quentin stood there, his expression unreadable but his eyes locked onto hers with quiet determination. She stepped aside without a word, allowing him in. He moved through her space with an ease that should have felt unnatural, but it didn't. It was as if he had been meant to be there all along. He turned to face her, his hands slipping into his pockets, the fabric of his suit shifting with the movement. There was something restrained about him, as if he was holding back words that wanted to spill free. She didn't want silence to stretch between them, so she asked the one question that had been circling her mind since the night before. "Why me?" His gaze sharpened. "What do you mean?" She crossed her arms, needing something to anchor herself. "You could have anyone. You live in a world full of people who understand it, who fit into it. But you saw me, and somehow that changed everything for you. I don't understand why." His jaw tightened slightly, but there was no hesitation in his answer. "Because you're not like them." She let out a breath, shaking her head. "That doesn't answer anything." He took a step closer, his presence filling the room. "It does. You don't care about my name, my wealth, or the power attached to it. You speak to me like I'm just a man, not a commodity. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a transaction when I was with you." The weight of his words settled between them, heavy and undeniable. Dahlia's heart pounded. She had spent so long convincing herself that she didn't belong in his world, but maybe he didn't belong in it either, not fully. But there was still fear beneath the surface, a quiet voice whispering that this was too much, too fast. "And what happens when reality sets in?" she asked, her voice softer now. "When the world reminds you that I don't fit." His hand lifted, fingers grazing her cheek in a touch so gentle it sent a shiver down her spine. "Then I remind the world that it doesn't decide for me." She closed her eyes for a brief moment, leaning into the warmth of his touch. It was reckless, dangerous even, but she couldn't ignore the pull between them any longer. Quentin's fingers slipped under her chin, tilting her face upward so that she had no choice but to meet his gaze. "I don't do things halfway, Dahlia. If I want something, I fight for it." Her breath hitched. "And you want this?" His answer was immediate. "Yes." The last of her hesitation crumbled. She reached for him, closing the distance between them, and the moment his lips met hers, the world outside ceased to exist. His kiss was slow, deliberate, as if memorizing every inch of her. There was no rush, no urgency, just the quiet certainty of something that had been inevitable from the start. When they finally pulled apart, his forehead rested against hers, their breaths mingling in the quiet space between them. Dahlia let out a shaky laugh. "I think you just ruined my perfectly normal life." Quentin's lips curved slightly, but there was something softer in his gaze now. "Good. Because I have no intention of letting you go." And for the first time, Dahlia didn't want to run. The world could wait. For now, this was enough.